issues happen overseas, they have a profound effect here in the United States. Every event that happens overseas has some impact on America. Often, these impacts are felt most intensely at the community level. Societies are truly tested to support one another, to come together, and to find solutions for a better future. That is what we will be talking about today in our last panel. Our final distinguished panel of experts bring a wealth of expertise and knowledge to the International Young Leaders Conference. These speakers will share insights about the future of technology, how we can protect ourselves in the growing technological world, and how we can bridge political divides, especially ahead of the 2024 presidential election. We will ask them about food security in Central PA and what solutions are to increase economic security. Finally, yet importantly, this panel will address the racial divides and tensions on a community level with an emphasis on social justice measures. We look forward to having this conversation led by moderators Connor and Selena, both World Affairs Council Harrisburg summer interns. Thank you for attending this panel and let us explore how we can strengthen our communities. Now let's go to Connor and Selena to start and introduce our last panel.
Connor, they can come up as you're reading their bios too.
Hello, my name is Connor Joyce. Looking at this, apparently my favorite number is 2. I'm a double major, I'm a double minor, and I'm also a double intern. I'm a double major in emerging threats and national security at Gettysburg College, as well as political science. I'm a double minor in history and peace and justice studies, and then I'm a double intern here at the World Affairs Council and at the Potomac Institute for Public Policy, focusing on terrorism. To my left is Selena. You can introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Selena Zhu, and I am a rising junior at Cumberland Valley High School. This summer, I'm interning with the World Affairs Council to further my knowledge and understanding of important global issues. Now, we would like to introduce our speakers for Panel 3, Empowering Communities.
When we announce you, could you please come up and join us on the stage then? So our first guest speaker is Dr. Benabess. Dr. Benabess is the Dean of Elizabethtown College's School of Business. She holds a PhD in economics from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and also holds a master's degree in economics from Western Illinois University. Our next guest speaker is Linda Beck. She's an instructor at HAC, Lebanon Valley College, and Harrisburg University Science and Technology. She holds a bachelor's in speech and communication from Millersville, and a master's in psychological education from Temple University. She currently works with Braver Angels.
We also have with us Ms. Kathy Anderson Martin, who serves as the Executive Director at Midwest Food Bank. After life-changing events and new perspectives gained, she changed career paths and joined the nonprofit community. Today, she leads the largest faith-based independent food bank in the U.S., distributing almost $500 million of food each year. Kathy and her team currently assist 332,000 people in PA, New York, and New Jersey. Finally, we have Sheryl Meck, Supervisor for the Civil Rights Outreach Coordinators Division within the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. She founded Diversity Respects, Inclusivity Values Equity, or DRIVE Committee of the Lancaster County Court of Common Pleas, which connects the court system with the community through outreach and internal training.
So first, we'd like to start off with a question for Dr. Benabess. AI godfather Jeffrey Hilton has advised the UK government that the universal basic income will be necessary for AI because it's just big impact on the workforce within the United Kingdom. Is this applicable for the United States, and what aspects can we improve as a country to brace for this?
Okay, thank you so much. Hello? Yes? Is it working? Okay.
Not
Good afternoon,
yet.
everyone.
Not yet. Sometimes it takes a delay or something, I don't know.
Hello? Hello? Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. AI, artificial intelligence, and technology are very, very important topic, especially today, because it's definitely impacting our lives, it's impacting our work that we do every day, and I'm sure it's going to impact our future. You mentioned a very, very important name, Jeffrey Hinton, who I think he's known as the godfather of AI, so he is more expert than I am. I'm not pretending to be an expert in AI. I'm coming from leadership, from the essential skills perspective, from a labor markets perspective, than I am from engineering or computer science perspective. According to Hinton, who is, if you don't know him, he's a former VP and fellow at Google. He just retired recently from there. He has worked over 50 years trying to create software to make sure that they learn like brains, and trying to do that, trying to work on ways that helping machines to learn how to learn, so they can learn more about the brain. And very recently, with artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence, such as ChatGPT, for instance, they just realized that artificial intelligence is actually more, can learn much more than any brain.
Wow.
And that creates some sort of a threat to labor market, right? So now people are wondering, how is that going to impact our employment? How is it going to impact our work? How is it going to impact our lives? Are we going to be replaced by this super intelligent power? It learns much faster, much quicker, and learns a lot more information than any brain that exists. There are many sectors that already have been impacted by artificial intelligence, right? In the past, as we know, manufacturing, for instance, right? Manufacturing has been very much impacted, such as the auto industry and the electronic assembly, right? They have been impacted by automation. We have also customer service and retail industry has been recently impacted by artificial intelligence, especially like the chat bots. Anybody using chat bots? How about the self-checkout? Anybody traveled in airport these days? You may not even have to speak to anyone. You can do your own self, check-in. You can buy food and drinks without having any human, right? Everything is all digital. From grocery stores, right? In the past, we used to have many cashiers. Now you have maybe only one, and the majority is self-checkout. So we can see, and also if you sometimes call in customer service, and you have this automation, right? They, chat bots that will answer and try to give you solutions to the problems that you have. So those are all sectors that we are already seeing an impact in labor markets. The one that's coming up maybe within 5 to 10 years, or maybe sooner, which is the transportation. We know currently that Tesla and Google, they're both working on self-driving cars, so we may not need drivers anymore. You know how now we have a lot of drivers driving trucks, for transportations. We may, maybe 5-10 years from now, we may just have trucks and cars going on their own to, transport supplies and resources. That can be a great opportunity, but it can also be a threat, because then those drivers need to learn new skills, need to, learn new things to do. I'm trying to think about another sector where it could be in future impacted. I may be missing one that I have in my mind. Okay, let me stop here for now.
Well, thank you, Dr. Benabess. That is really, really interesting. I mean, yeah, that's really interesting. I guarantee you, you know, in the future, they're going to look back at us and like, what are you guys talking about, AI? But that suits, in the current moment that we're in, that is very, very important and fascinating. But another very important and fascinating thing that I think that we should all discuss is polarization. So every generation, Ms. Beck, says that this is the worst polarization we've ever had. Look back at Vietnam, this is the worst we've ever had, this is terrible. Well, today, we say the same things. How does the United States rank on this scale of throughout our history? Are we the most polarized we've truly ever been, or is this just a blip in the radar of the grand scheme of things?
Here's the short answer to that question. We don't know. And the reason that we don't know is because we don't have adequate opportunities to measure what the actual polarization was during the Civil War, during the Vietnam War versus now. So we can certainly say that this is one of the most polarized times. We can't necessarily compare it. But we do have some data, and this comes from Pew Research. We have some data that shows that we have become more divided and more polarized by party. And we see this particularly in Congress. If they, and I forget how they studied this, but I think it was on voting record or something, but they can see since the 1950s that Democrats have moved further left and Republicans have moved a little further right. We also can see that that moderates used to be the dominant factor in Congress, and now I think that, if I remember the data correctly, don't quote me on this, but like in the 1970s there were like 200 and some who identified as moderates, and now there's 24. So and so I think that gives a little bit of indication. And if I may just go on and talk a little bit about Braver Angels. Braver Angels was founded in 2016 as a result of the divisive 2016 election. And there were 3 friends in South Lebanon, Ohio, and they thought, can we do something about this ugliness that we're seeing? And so they put their heads together and they came up with a red-blue workshop. And that red-blue workshop brought together equal numbers of Trump supporters and Clinton supporters who would have been very angry at each other after that 2016 election. And thus began Braver Angels. But I also need to tell you that one of those 3 friends was a marriage counselor. And our red-blue bread and butter workshop is actually based on marriage counseling principles to bring together people from different sides to come to agreement. Braver Angels has grown. We are a predominantly grassroots organization. We are located in all 50 states. We have many, I like to say that if there's something that someone is involved in, they can be involved in it. We've got multiple caucuses. We have music and drama. And one thing, in listening to the earlier discussion, we also have something that is called the American Hope Campaign. And there are 3 parts to that campaign. And the first part is to sign a petition that will be given to lawmakers across the country to, and this is the wording, to demand that they use less polarizing language. The second thing that we'll be doing, which is quite interesting, we did have people who were at the Republican National Convention. We will have people at the Democratic National Convention, and myself and many other Braver Angels will be going out to the polls to introduce voters to Braver Angels. Just one other, then the third point, and this is what I wanted to bring up, was we have a series of workshops, and one is called Common Ground Workshops, where we bring we call reds and blues together to take a look at certain particular issues. Last year, we focused on trustworthy elections, and the folks who run those Common Ground Workshops did 28 workshops with equal number of participants of Reds and Blues and found more than 700 points of agreement. They cultivated them down into somewhere around 25 points that they are now working to introduce to the state secretaries of state to see and provide this information that these are things that people are really saying that they're wanting. And just, this is the last thing that I really want to say, is that Braver Angels we do not try to change people's minds. And we have people, if there's, we have conspiracy theorists, we have people who are far right, we have people who are far left, we have lots of people in the middle. The focus of Braver Angels is that we can, by listening to each other and by understanding each other a little bit more, we get further in the process. And there are many, many studies that back that up.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. I definitely learned that how honorable that is, and the fact that we have marriage counseling for politics is...
And may I say one other thing that may be of interest, because our original name was Better Angels. Does anybody recognize that term? It's actually a phrase that Abraham Lincoln, who's a man who knew something about division, it came from a line in his first inaugural address that asked, that appealed to the better angels of our nature. But as happens in today's environment, there were some copyright issues. So we became Braver Angels because it certainly takes bravery to step into this space today.
Let us hope that just in the time of Lincoln, we can speak to our better angels today. And I know that speaking with people on Congressional Hill, that they agree with 90% of what's said, and just 10% is what we all see. So let's all speak to our better angels and push forward with that. Selena has some questions for our next panelist, and I'd like to turn it over to her now.
So this next question is for Ms. Anderson Martin, addressing hunger in the U.S. There are many problems that come with food insecurity, for example, poverty, discrimination, and food deserts. Ms. Anderson Martin, in Pennsylvania, what is the most common issue causing food insecurity?
Thank you for having me. That does it. Oh, there we go. Thank you for having me. And just to clarify, when you introduced me as the leader of a $500 million food rescue and distribution organization, I'm the leader of the one in Pennsylvania as opposed to all 10, but I will take credit and thank you. So thank you for bolstering my resume there in just a few minutes. But Midwest Food Bank, we are a national organization started by a farmer in Illinois in 2003. And he basically said, you know what, we grow more than enough food in the United States to feed everybody, but yet there are so many people in need. So he literally turned his barn, his family, into a food bank, quote unquote, to make resources available to ministries and small organizations, nonprofits in that very rural area. Because really the problem isn't the amount of food, it's the access and logistics to get the food to the people who need it. And that's why the organization was founded. And they were a Christian family who said, you know what, we're gonna pray about this and maybe we can do it in the Midwest, so we'll call it Midwest Food Bank. And I was just saying that that's very difficult in Pennsylvania to have the name Midwest Food Bank when you're in Pennsylvania, because everyone says, are you aware that you're not in Iowa? And I say, I know that. But that's what they thought. And basically they said, maybe we can replicate this concept in the Midwest. And then before you know it, there are 10 locations. There's also a location in Kenya and Haiti. And we are a $500 million food organization. But when you ask about food insecurity and so forth, and before I came to Midwest 3 years ago, when Midwest Pennsylvania was founded late 2020, I worked at the Salvation Army Harrisburg for 11 years. So I saw the other side of it. We give the food to the nonprofits who then give it to the people. Certainly at the Salvation Army, I saw the people coming in for the food. But we said there, and we say then at Midwest, if you're someone that's hungry in America, that's a symptom of a whole lot of other problems. And I say that because today, one of the agencies that came into our warehouse is an organization in Philadelphia that comes to our warehouse in Middletown to get food. And they have an outreach in Kensington, and you've probably heard about the problems in Kensington, Philadelphia area with fentanyl and tranq and so forth. And they do a wound care ministry. And they come to us to get food to share with those people who certainly have needs. But is their main problem food? No, they certainly need food, but there are a lot of other problems. A lot of drug abuse, certainly. They've shared with me that 75% of the people that they work with and the addicts that they work with were abused as children and had very difficult childhood. So they're taking drugs to ease the pain. So there's food insecurity, and that food insecurity issues have certainly increased over the past 3 or 4 years. And another reason for that is you see the average family right now is spending a percentage of their household income on food is at a 30-year high. Because all of us, I think anecdotally, I go to the grocery store, I come home and say, that was $150. Do any of you do that? Okay, or that was $200, and I start complaining. But people are spending more of their income because of inflation and certainly food inflation. And just over the past 4 years, for instance, in 2022, it peaked at about 11%. And so the average over the past 4 years has been about 6% increase in food prices, and we hear 25% and so forth. Before that, it was about 1.1%. So certainly costs are increasing, so if somebody's been living on the margins or on the bubble, they're having a harder time paying their basic bills, and housing, another thing that's increased. So those increasing prices affect more and more families, and that's why our numbers are up. That's why the agencies that we help are seeing more people. I mentioned I worked at the Salvation Army for 11 years. On Thursdays, they open 100, I like stories, I like numbers, but I like stories, so forgive me, I'll tell stories. But for 11 years, we did food minutes, we did a food pantry and so forth. Every Thursday, they open 120 food pantry appointments. Not that you can come to the pantry that day, but for the appointment next week. They will have a line tomorrow morning at 6, 7 o'clock out the door, and they have 6 phone lines that they will have difficulty getting an outline because of the numbers of people calling in. And just to get an appointment. They're not getting food that day, that's to get an appointment the next week. I worked there 11 years, we never had lines out the door at 7 a.m. before we opened. So I think that's a kind of anecdotal, I can give you the numbers and so forth, but that's an anecdotal of what's happening and what we're seeing. And all of our partners, we serve about 200 throughout central Pennsylvania, and then we go into New York City through an outreach through Times Square Church and up through Scranton and so forth. They're all seeing increased number of people, and for all kinds of reasons. But again, a lot of other reasons, whether it's addiction, whether it's employment, whether it's children. We do see a lot more kids who don't have food for the weekends, and agencies that are sending food home. Neglected, you name it. So there's a lot of other issues. It's not just food insecurity. That's a symptom of bigger problems.
Thank you very much for your insight, Ms. Anderson-Martin. Continuing on topic of social justice, we would now like to ask Ms. Meck a question. So Ms. Meck, can you please start by sharing your insights on the current racial divides and tensions at the community level? Specifically, how can social justice measures be effectively implemented to bridge these divides and foster a more inclusive society?
Good afternoon. Still good? Okay. Thank you. Great question. So I would like to start off by saying that I too believe that we are at a pivotal point in history. It's an election year. There's a lot of tension going on. I am positive that everyone in this room has a story that they could share on discrimination they faced or some type of divide in their environment or tension that they felt in the last year. And so specific to the community level, I'd actually like to take a moment and ask a couple questions for you to internally process for yourself. And so I will ask these questions, and if we could just take a moment and think about how it applies to us, I'll move forward with finishing answering the question. So ask yourself, what does your community look like to you? What does your neighborhood look like? What does your friends, your circle of friends look like? Who do you spend your time with? Your coworkers? What's your family structure? What do your weekends look like? How do cookouts look like that you go to? What messages are you receiving? And what I mean by that is, what material are you reading? What are you reading on the internet? What are we watching in the news? What kind of conversations are we having? I think all of those messages we are hit with daily, and it completely relates to how we are racialized, socialized, and culturalized. And that's your experience in this journey of life, and that's your foundation. And so in my line of work with the Civil Rights Division, we serve the people of the Commonwealth, and we hear several types of stories of tension and discrimination and outright racism. So just to give a couple examples of the different things that I've been working with this year is schools and education. If we're talking about an area that is predominantly Hispanic, and yet the school has not made the changes necessary to meet those needs of the students, we're now left with primarily Spanish-speaking students and no way to learn because there's no bilingual teachers. There's no bilingual mental health counselors. There's no representation of them on school boards. And that negatively impacts that child, and these children are being left behind, and that is happening today. Other examples and stories that we hear are nooses hanging in state prisons done by correctional officers, where our Black and brown prisoners have to see that in their face. Those are acts of intimidation and threat. KKK passing out flyers. You could be going to a grocery store and come out with a recruitment flyer on your vehicle. It's happening. School boards, that's a big thing. We know the conversation surrounding book bans and making different decisions that could potentially have disparate treatment towards our students. There are actually secret meetings going on to help maintain the agenda of this so-called protective, I'm trying to think of a better word, but to organize to maintain banning books to keep that happening. And so I say all these different, these lists of things. They're not an exclusive list. This is just a very quickly brief list of stories that we hear on the regular. And I'm sure that you heard this message throughout today of discrimination or racism at the international level, at the national level, and now here with me to speak with you at the community level about that. And so my message, though, that I definitely wanted to bring across today is to never underestimate the power of ripple effects, your ripple effects. And so it really starts the process as far as changes to bridge the divide or help make a more inclusive and equitable society. It starts with you. It starts with looking internally at your implicit biases, because we all have them. So, you have to take some time to look into yourself. What makes you step back for a second? What makes you afraid of certain things? What makes you question certain things? And just because something's different doesn't mean that it's less than. And I love the kind of work that the PHRC does, because we fight for the people's rights that regardless of how you identify, what you look like, what your beliefs are, you have a seat at the table. You should have equitable access to education, healthcare, all the things. Let me see what else. So what can we do about it? Let's talk about some things, and I have a list here that it's in no particular order, but when I asked you those questions earlier, some of these responses that I have here, you can take back and apply to whatever your answers were about your community and what your friends and family look like. I want us to know that the most important thing is that our voices have weight to advocate for the changes that are beneficial to affect our neighbors. You must always walk in truth, love, and kindness. As I mentioned, looking internally at our implicit biases. But it starts with you. How do you identify, and what privileges do you have? Because we all have privileges. So if I look at myself, I identify as a daughter, a mother, a sister, a woman, heterosexual, Christian, middle class, unless the prices of chicken keep going up. So, but for right now, I'm middle class. I have the privilege of ableism. I'm still under 40. And there are different privileges that each of us carry that puts us in a position that might not be as good as the next person beside us or better. And I think that we should be in a position where we can use our privilege to help the next person and really, really shine light on that, because I know white privilege is a difficult conversation, but it doesn't have to be. And if I could just speak to that for a second, we want to celebrate our blackness, our brownness, and our whiteness, so long as it doesn't come from a place of hate or a place of privilege or a place of power, that's good. That's a great thing. Another thing that I wanted to talk about here is don't be a bystander. When you see something, say something. And it goes back to your privilege. And school boards, let's talk about that. School boards are the members are voted in. So if school boards are passing decisions that are delivering disparate treatment to the community, that's where you use your voice. That's where you rally together and you come together and you vote those people out. And I think that that's an important takeaway too when you think about what's going on in your community. People that we vote in positions of power, it matters, but they would not be there without our vote. So just putting that out there, vote. And so these are the ripple effects that I'm referring to. Even the smallest ripple effect is of great value. So don't diminish the value if it's just in a conversation with the person next to you or if it's a setting like this. And some main points to conclude on making how to bridge the divide. Again, ask yourself, who are you and what's your story? What is your message? What does your community look like? What are the messages that you're hearing, that you're feeding into your mind, body, and soul when you're reading and surfing TikTok? What can you do to increase the knowledge of the vast differences of humanity? What's a religion you might not know much about, or a culture? Read on it. And then ask yourself, what seed can I plant to start my own social justice ripple effect? Because never forget the power of your ripple effects. Thank you.
I'd like to open it up for questions because these panelists have all been really, really great. But before I do that, I really want to ask a question first. Ms. Meck.
Yeah.
Ripple effects are big and small. You mentioned it's an election year. I would love to learn your mind about the federal pre-clearance policy that was removed from the federal government a couple of years ago, where the federal government went, since the Civil War we protected, civil rights and everything in the South for many states, Mississippi, Alabama, the list goes on. But then we decided we were just going to kind of say no to that in today's era. What do you think about the federal pre-clearance policy being revoked? Should it still be in favor? Do you favor it being gone? Like, what's your stance on that?
Okay, so I will say that the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission is a nonpartisan agency, and so I will answer this question as Sheryl. I think that when we have the federal law, for example, Roe versus Wade, the overturning of that, and it trickles down and affects every woman's reproductive rights. We're talking about Project 2025. I'm just going to go there. We're talking about Project 2025. We're talking about Agenda 47 or whatever it is. I can tell you that as a woman of color, is it still on?
Yeah.
As a woman of color, as a mother to biracial children, as a social justice advocate, I'm afraid. I am so afraid of what this year will produce, no matter who wins the election, but most importantly, if certain agendas roll out, continue to play the way that they do. And that's why I cannot emphasize enough in the power of ripple effects, in the power of having the conversations. And I think that what most importantly comes with that is that when you're faced with an opportunity to have a conversation of someone with opposition, listen to understand instead of listen to respond. You're going to have a better outcome from that point, that advantage point. It is terrifying when we think about the people who are in positions of power that are making decisions that can tell me what I can or cannot do, where maybe I can go, who I can marry to, what I'm learning in school. And this is supposed to be America, land of the free. And so, which is why in my opinion, the greatest power and strength comes at the community level. It comes at the neighborhoods. It comes in small rooms like this where you can come together and have these conversations and stand up for what's right. Because then you can let your local leaders know, you can advocate to your local leaders. It works while maintaining, you gotta watch what's going on up top, but continue to advocate to get the right people in office because they hold the position of power. And if we're in their ear, we're at least doing our job. So that's my share of answer.
Thank you, and I couldn't agree more, and I'm also just as afraid as you are for these things that you're discussing, so you're not alone in that boat. But thank you guys all for fighting the good fight of sharing this information with us. But now I'd like to open it up to all of you out here, because I'm sure you guys have great questions. First, I'd like to start off with Cece.
Hello, hi. My first question is for Dr. Benabess. And with your experience as a leader in business education, how can institutions balance the need to stay ahead of technological trends with the necessity of ensuring ethical and responsible use of AI technology?
Thank you for your question. It's a very good question that keeps me awake every night, because while we are having curriculum, and trying to prepare our students, for the job after graduation, we have to make sure that our curriculum is current, is relevant, is contemporary, and while things are changing at a faster rate outside of higher education, we have to make sure that we are staying on track. In fact, I believe that higher education is a field where I believe we supply talent. So I want to believe that we need to be ahead of the curve, right? Because we're preparing you for the next job that you're gonna have 5 years from now. So it's becoming more and more difficult today to make sure that your curriculum is as relevant, as practical, as contemporary and modern as possible, because it's becoming very hard to predict the future because of all these fast advancements in technology that even the computer scientists and engineers are still trying to figure out what's next. And that makes it a little bit difficult for us as educators and as leaders in higher education to make sure that what you're learning and what we're promising you in higher education, once you graduate, you will be ready for that job. So I think the solution for this is to make sure that there is always partnership with government, with businesses, with the community, trying to understand the needs, trying your best to predict what the future holds. But it is tough because sometimes you feel like you're leading in a fog. You can see in very short period, you can't see further. And as an educator, you want to, project 5 years from now so you can create that curriculum and help the students. But as of now, we are just going step by step.
I'm going to hop in here with one more question. Promise is my last one. Dr. Benabess, what do you think about with AI in education? Like, should AI be an active part in our education today? For the same reason that I wear glasses to help my eyes, should AI be helping me to do things?
This is also a very good question, and it is a huge controversy currently in higher education among educators and among my colleagues in School of Business, because people have different opinion about it and how to use it. People have different style on teaching. I'm going to just share my own opinion on that. If we say and if we pledge to our students that if you come to us, we're gonna help you be well prepared, for the next career, for whatever aspiration you have, we need to make sure to do that. And if you are gonna work in an environment where AI is part of your everyday life, we need to make sure that we prepare you to learn how to use it, ethically, what's the best way to use it, because otherwise if we don't, we're putting you at a disadvantage, because the business you're gonna work, or maybe you will not even be, at a good competitive advantage because you don't know anything about it. So they rather have another candidate who knows what's the best way to use it, how to be efficient in using it. So in my opinion, it definitely should be incorporated in many classrooms, in many curriculum as possible. Now, there are also limits to that, right? Because we want to make sure that our students are developing their critical thinking, their creativity, their emotional intelligence, and all of those things. So I think it should be some sort of a balance. And this is true not only in higher education, I think it's true also in the business world. Because currently, I think in our time now, they say that 99% of resources are being used to the development of AI and generative AI. All the energy, the money, the resources, the research and development is going toward developing constantly. There is 1% of resources is used toward the regulations, the threat. It's very small. We know it's there. We know that there are some areas of concerns, but only 1% that's being devoted to figure out how to solve, how to eliminate or reduce those kinds of risks. I think it's the same thing for higher education. We are trying to incorporate it. We're trying to talk to faculty to make sure that they're equipped with the technology, with the knowledge that they need, so they can change their curriculum, they can change their way of teaching, they can change their assignment. It can be, some faculty embrace that, and others, don't like change, right? So you try your best to give them that professional development and training so they can help and teach relevant curriculum.
Thank you. And now it's time for everyone else for questions.
Hello. Okay. I have two questions, one for Ms. Meck and also one for Dr. Benabess. So my first one for Ms. Meck. I previously thought that the act of banning books was becoming less popular because in 9th grade, my teacher actually made us, as a class, very proud that our school didn't ban books and that we emphasized the importance of reading difficult and controversial books to gain a greater perspective. But I'm curious that you mentioned that you've noticed that school boards are secretly meeting to ban books. So I'm curious if you've seen multiple schools do that, and if so, if you see a trend of the type of school that's doing that, like the location of the school, the demographic of the school board that's doing that, like if the schools that are trying to ban books, if there's like a trend among them.
Thank you for that question. So I am seeing quite a few. I'm not sure if the school district, help me team, with was it the one about they would not let the gentleman come in and talk about bullying because he identified he's a gay actor. What school was that? Cumberland Valley. So we all, if you were following during that time, and that's something that the Civil Rights Division and my Civil Rights Outreach coordinators that, we do. We found out that decision was made. They weren't going to let that actor come in and talk about bullying, which is ironic. They bullied him, right? And so I remember Montrell Smith and I, we went out to the school we're in the audience during the emergency school board meeting to revisit that decision. And what I saw was powerful. What I saw there were over 100 people signed up to talk. I think we were there from 6 to 11 o'clock at night, and then I left and continued to watch it on TV at home. But what we saw goes back to what I was saying about the weight in your voice, in that so many students got up and one at a time shared their story, whether they were personally affected because of how they identified, whether their friend was, or whether just because they believe in what happened was wrong, and shared what it's doing to the community. And story after story after story, and then by the end of the night, they voted, they overturned it and let them come. So that just goes to the testimony of the power in your voice and then collectively. To answer your question about the banning of books, without saying like the exact school names, it is happening, and it's happening often. I feel confident saying it's happening more than we realize, more than we know about. And so that's why I say pay special attention to your community, who's on the board, what do they represent, what have they done for the community, what kind of people are they, what kind of neighbors are they. There's different hate groups out there. I think it's important to note that Pennsylvania, throughout the last several years, has always ranked in the top 10 with the highest number of hate groups. our state. And so when we have that data and that knowledge, and we know that there's side conversations going on with different groups, it's even more imperative that we come together and to speak out on that. So I know that was a general way to ask your question. Just as far as the PHRC, we are monitoring and we're watching for discrimination that could potentially lead to a complaint being filed and things of that nature. But again, it just all goes back to continue to advocate.
Thank you. I actually find that really interesting because the school that I mentioned, where our English class really emphasized reading banned and controversial books, was part of Cumberland Valley. So I think that shows how there's an unfortunate divide between teachers and the school boards, showing that the school boards' decisions may not reflect the true values of the teachers that inhabit that school. But thank you for your response.
And just to follow up on that too, I am aware that does seem to be a trend, where the teachers who are the ones that are day in and day out with the students are the first line of defense. You know, they serve as a safety blanket for students to come talk to. They know the stories in and out. And I love hearing that, you know, that there are teachers out there that are advocating to read, to continue to read these books, because what harm are we doing by reading the truth in our history? Absolutely nothing. What harm are we doing by eliminating that choice? It's a suffocation of our children's education.
Thank you. And for Dr. Benabess, back to AI, we've seen that artificial intelligence has had an immense, great impact on our society. It's made life much more effective and faster and easier, but at this related to education, it has taken over our lives. It's made schoolwork much easier. Students can just put in a prompt and have their work done for them in a snap of their finger. We've seen that it's been very detrimental to the environment. So with all of these factors that combine, this is more of like an opinionated question, but do you think artificial intelligence is more of a benefit or a detriment to society?
That's a very good question, and it's very, I'm going to say that generative AI specifically that we're talking about, right? I think it has tremendous advantages. It can do tasks so quickly, more accurately than any of us, right? I think any one of us who's doing repetitive work, you know, the work that we do that takes so long to get done, you can do it now in a matter of a second. I think we can all agree that's a fabulous thing. We should be, you know, happy and celebrating that we have time to do other things that maybe we enjoy. So for that, I would say that it's a fabulous, it's an amazing time where we are. But anything, I think, anything that happens, any innovation, it comes with some sorts of concerns, with some sort of threats. And we need to make sure to find a good balance between the two. And the good balance for me, in my opinion, will be regulation and especially ethics. Some of the concerns I worry about with AI, because it is so smart. I worry about the fake news, for example, that can increase, right? Because now we have this generative AI that can create fake videos, fake voices, fake images. How can we distinguish between what's right and what's not? That's only gonna go up. So in my opinion, just like I think, for example, the government does not want us to make fake money, right? That's like a huge crime, right? I mean, imagine sharing fake money. That's like serious crime. I believe that the government should treat these kinds of things like sharing fake video as a serious crime, because other agency or other people may use that in a very harm way, you know, to manipulate people, to manipulate the elections, to manipulate all kinds of things, and that can be very, very scary. So I'm hopeful that while this is a fantastic innovation that can help us be more efficient, we can operate better, we can have maybe better quality of life because things can be done much efficiently, and we can maybe enjoy doing things that we really care about and that's meaningful. We can develop skills that cannot be replicated by AI, and we can focus on those kind of skills and competencies. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we have our government that can help regulate these kinds of generative AI to make sure that people can be accountable if they use it in a wrong way.
Thank you.
My question is for Ms. Anderson-Martin. So you talked about how we have the resources to feed everyone in America, but the logistics forces not makes it so we can't. With the increasing technology and improvement in logistics, do you think that we could eventually eliminate hunger in America and even the world, or do you think that there's always going to be logistical issues for this?
As a country, does anyone have a guess on how much of our food supply we waste every year as a percentage? Give me a number.
60.
Well, I heard 30 and 60, so in between. 40% of our food supply goes to waste every year. Now, some of that, when I have student groups come in, I say every 10 chicken nuggets, 4 of them are going in the trash. So that's, I have a daughter who's 23 who has probably never eaten a complete meal in her life, so she's probably a couple percent of that. But so that's part of it. The bigger part is overproduction or just harvest. Just recently, at Midwest, our focus is on rescue. And when we say rescue, to go get those, a lot of food banks purchase food. We're trying to rescue those opportunities that are overproduction or warehouse, there's food in the warehouse or so forth. Just recently, we got an offer of truckloads of almond milk, or the boxed almond milk, goat milk, and it's, I can't say the name, but it's a coffee company that uses sizes called Vente and so forth. So I would say small, medium, and large and tell them I'm boycotting those terms. But anywho, so they said we have this milk available. Guess how many truckloads were available? Take a guess.
30.
Someone say 20? You're not even close. How many? 200. Why was it available? Because of a mislabeling thing. So it was going to go in the trash. So there were 200 truckloads of almond milk. Last fall, we got a call and said, and again, we have a national network, so we took most of that through our 10 locations so that we can then give it out versus having that go in the trash. Last fall, and I share this because the question is technology. This is just, what happens, and it's beyond, or technology isn't the sole answer. But last fall, there were truckloads of apples from West Virginia. You want to take a guess on how many truckloads of apples were available?
300.
Not even close. 1,500. So I share that. So we took one of those 1,500 truckloads of apples in 1,000-pound boxes. We took one of those truckloads, and then we have volunteers. Today, volunteers were sorting. We got 40,000 pounds of pasta in 1,000-pound boxes from New Jersey. Again, it was going to be thrown away. We got the call on Thursday. We had to be there by Friday morning to get it. That's not so easy. So when I say that, everyone says, let's just rescue the food and give it to the people. It's not that easy because of just either the amount or where you have to go and how quickly you have to get it. So those 1,500 truckloads of apples, we got one truckload of apples and volunteers are bagging it, and then you have to sort it, and then there's bad apples, which we gave to a pig farmer, and then, oh no, the apples have been sitting here for 3 days and we're starting to get fruit flies. So I share that. It's a very complex issue. It's not, everyone says, oh, it's easy, let's go get the food and give it out. Especially, we want to get fresh food because that's better nutrition, but that requires quicker response. It requires partners that have refrigeration and freezers. We work with a lot of small, I call them the church basement pantries, and I love them because they're helping communities, the people that otherwise might fall through the cracks. They might have a refrigerator and freezer like you have at home, so they can't take a pallet of green beans like we got yesterday. So there's a lot of issues, and it's not that simple with saying, well, one thing technology has helped us, we have a cloud-based inventory management system, so we know what we have, what can go out, who can take it, we scan it, barcode it, and so forth. So it does make that quicker, but there are a lot of issues, and we do our best to do that. And certainly the production and so forth, and what do they grow and how much do they grow? They had a bumper crop of apples in West Virginia, and maybe next year they don't. So it just varies, but there have to be organizations, and that's why we feel that we take a space of going in and trying on that rescue space versus just trying to purchase it from brokers who actually buy excess and then try to sell it back to food banks. I get those calls every day, and honestly, they make me a little irritated. So, but that's what we do.
Right. My question is for you, Ms. Dr. Benabess. I think something I often get when it comes to AI, it's that it's more specific to us, like younger generations, 30 and younger. And I say, well, all those also have to deal with that, because if you're having the chance to live another decade, that's probably something you'll have to find out, that you'll probably be affected by AI much more than you think of it right now. So how do we get these new technologies, AI, to this older generation, so that when your group of people gets in your retirement chair, you know how to use it in a proper way to help you too? Thank you.
So I just want to rephrase the question to make sure I understood. You're asking specifically about the young professionals, right? How to learn how to use AI, or
For the older.
oh, you're not thinking about the younger. So the younger one, you think we're okay, right? But for older people, yes, older than like 30. That's okay, but I got it. Right? So for people who are older, how can you deal, because you have to learn this new thing, and especially what you're mentioning, you're talking about generational, because you are, digitized generation, right? At a very young age, you have been, growing up with smartphones and everything, right? So I think your question is more of, people like my age, right? Okay, very good question. I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly. So your question is a very good one, because especially you're asking me, who I spent over 22 years of my career in higher education. I am a big supporter, obviously, and advocate for lifelong learning. And I tell young professionals and older professionals, seasoned professionals, to never be comfortable. Always learn. Always upskill. Because nothing stays stagnant. So I have been always going to school. I love to be a student. As much as I have been in classroom teaching, I love to be in the other side. I love to learn. I like to learn new skills. What's the next thing? You cannot be stagnant, especially today. So what I would say to seasoned professionals, experts, to always learn what's next. Now, if you are in a field, I had recently a professional who was paralegal and was very concerned about her job, because she said, well, most of the work they give me is repetitive tasks that can easily be replaced by AI. What am I going to do then? My answer to that professional is, then think about things that AI cannot replicate. Meaning, for instance, essential skills, and we don't like to call them soft skills anymore, right? Everybody knows essential skills, emotional intelligence. I know the other speaker was here talking about cultural competency, talking about leadership, because I believe that while AI can provide us the speed, I think people can provide direction. So being able to understand strategic planning, strategic thinking, it's very critical. So how can you make sure that you're not replaceable. And by the way, for all our students who are here, I would like to offer you one copy of my book that's right there. It's called Irreplaceable Human Intelligence, Surpassing AI Outreach. That's this question here, that's what motivates me to write the book that was just published in November of 23. Because I start to worry about what's gonna happen to seasoned professionals who have been doing that work for so long, and now their companies don't need them anymore because they can do tasks much faster, much quicker, and even more accurately with no errors. And the answer is those people have to think about their positions. They have to think about what are skills that I need to develop so the company cannot fire me. Because if you are focusing only on what the technical things that you do every day that AI can replace, then you can easily be replaced. So think about how you can develop teams. How can you solve problems? How can you have that sense of emotional intelligence and emotional agility, leading with purpose? For now, AI cannot do that. AI cannot replicate these kinds of things.
Thank you. I have lots of questions for you, but for time's sake, I'll keep it to one. And that was for Miss Linda Beck. So the Red Blue workshops you guys mentioned fascinated me because you mentioned that you use some aspects of marriage counseling. So you guys don't have to spill all your secrets, but can you give me some tips on how to communicate better with people, not just from different political perspectives, but just people with different perspectives, how to effectively communicate with them?
It really goes back, and let me go off on a slight tangent here. If you go to our website, braverangels.org, you will see all of the workshops that we offer. And we are largely a grassroots organization, and so I'm a volunteer, most of the people in the organization are volunteers,